And hello, everyone. Welcome to the Real Estate Show on KCMX News Media 880. Pete Belcaster and Joe Brett, the real estate guys, with you today. And thanks for joining us here on this August 24th show. Today, I mean, I can think of all the issues that are out there. We can talk about smoke. We can talk about lots of things. But today, Guy Giles, who's our resident mortgage expert from Bank 34, is in the house with us and going to talk about mortgage interest rates for us. And in the middle here is Nate Sickler, who's the Jackson County Sheriff. So thanks for coming, fellas, today. It's nice to have you here. You know?
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, Guy Giles, I mean, how do you two know each other, first of all? I was curious about that because you guys are still on a committee together, I found out.
He showed up one night at midnight and put me in handcuffs when we first met.
That's how most people meet their sheriff, right?
Yeah.
And their bankers, I think.
Yeah.
Sheriffs and
the county started a marijuana advisory committee several months ago. I think it was end of February, beginning of March. And, I was asked by one of the commissioners to sit on this committee to provide law enforcement perspective. And Guy was asked to sit on it from a citizen perspective. And that's how we met.
And how it started. Yeah. So tell me about the marijuana committee. I didn't know about that. So what is that about?
Well, it's a committee that was put together to look at the issues surrounding recreational and medical marijuana in Jackson County. Because after marijuana was legalized, there became a influx of growers, people obviously using marijuana, and then a lot of issues kind of stemmed from that. Nobody knew really what was going to happen with this new market.
It was all different, wasn't it? Everything was different about it.
And it was almost overnight for Jackson County. Grows sprung up everywhere. Neighbors were upset, and reasonably so for some of the individuals that started growing. The OLCC was overwhelmed. And so, it comes back to the law enforcement commissioners, your county government, all these complaints about all the things going on. And, there just wasn't the resources or the infrastructure set up to deal with all the issues surrounding this new market.
I remember, Joe, when Corey Falls, who was the predecessor for Sheriff Sickler, was with us. And we were talking about this issue, and I remember him saying so specifically that enforcement of this whole new world comes down to the sheriff. It comes down to you, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, for the most part. I mean, we have our areas that we have jurisdiction over. The Medford Police has the city of Medford that they have jurisdiction over. But in essence, it does fall down to law enforcement as a whole.
Law enforcement as a whole.
So, and given that most of the grows that we have out there are rural, so that does fall.
They're not in
mostly,
they're not in the cities. Right?
Mostly it does fall onto the sheriff.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Anyways, this committee was put together to help sort out some of the issues, to kind of find out what's kind of truth, and then maybe what is folklore, or maybe stuff that isn't true, and then advise the commissioners on maybe some policy changes and give them some information so they can act.
And it does fall on the county a lot, because the biggest city in our jurisdiction in our county, Medford, doesn't allow outdoor grows.
Right.
So that just pushes, and the people that are industry minded have looked for bigger farm plots like that.
Sure.
And it has brought a total change in the culture to our county and to our county residents.
It sounds like we're kind of getting at least a little more control of things, or at least more information out there or something. Is that what that is?
One of the best things about this committee is it's not just me as a pissed off landowner. It's a little bit of everybody. It's a couple weed growers, and they've actually turned out to be really good people that are doing the system correctly. They're going through all their compliance pieces, and it's actually a lot more daunting than you would know than just go grab a hose and some plants and grow it. I mean, there's a lot of expense that goes into doing it properly. So they're actually pretty upset with the people that are not doing it the right way also. I mean, then you have the water master on there, code enforcement, a little bit of everybody that's involved with this thing. So hopefully we can just kind of put something together to where, some good advice to where we can, live together, because that's kind of what it's about.
I would assume that you've pretty much seen about everything out there so far in this first few years of this growing, this new industry. I mean, that's just, as you say, popped up literally overnight. What have you seen out there?
Well, I think what we saw was the huge swell initially, and we still have.
And that was in land too. I mean, prices for properties that people seriously, I'm sure, as you know, people just saw dollar signs.
Sure.
We're gonna make millions of dollars
Rush.
on this. The
yeah,
green
it's
rush.
called the
Yeah,
green rush. We referred
rush.
to that in the committee a few
Yeah.
times. We've seen all manner of things. We've had illegal grows that have had to be pulled.
Okay.
Because they're just not licensed, not complying.
Right.
We have black market suppliers. Distributing out of the state. We
Taking
have
it out of state. Yeah.
then we have the whole other aspect. And one thing that I try to get across to folks who aren't in the law enforcement business is we have become more busy as an agency. Now, there's a lot of factors that the population's growing, but all these things, marijuana has contributed to that. We've had home invasions,
Yes,
robberies, thefts,
Increase in
burglaries,
crime,
assaults,
right. Yeah.
DUI crashes, you name it. We've dealt with it as a law enforcement agency. And we didn't get an influx of resources to just deal with that aspect of marijuana and the industry. And then you talk about trying to enforce all of the laws regarding the regulation of marijuana on top of that.
Yeah.
Right.
It's really overwhelming. So that's what this committee is, I think, identified some significant shortfalls in the system itself. But they've really kind of identified that resources across the board for us, for OLCC, for MADG, which is the Medford area drug gang enforcement, but the drug team.
Coordinated effort in that aspect.
And so OSP, and so the state has seemed like they've realized this, and so there's some opportunities coming up. We've just applied for a grant through the state, a program that was created earlier this year to hopefully get some resources, hire some staffing so we can focus
on enforcement here.
On enforcement, yeah, just
okay.
Because MADG, the county drug team, they do a great job, but they're super busy with not only marijuana, but they work the heroin cases, the methamphetamine cases.
I would certainly think that most people in Jackson and Josephine counties, for that matter, want it controlled. I mean, want it done right. Not the illegal stuff, not the problems, and they're going to look to you, obviously, to calm that. What's the biggest complaint that you get, Nate, in this whole thing? Would you say is there one?
It depends on the time of year. I think for us, as we get into harvest season, it'll be these people are shipping marijuana out of state.
That's the biggest issue to me. I don't know. To me, that's one part of it. That's one part.
Yeah, I mean, we get everything from land use issues. Our code enforcement division at the county has been inundated over the last couple years with additional calls about buildings going up without permits, electrical things. We got land use issues, fence. I mean, you name it.
Taking water illegally.
You name it, we get it. So obviously, that doesn't necessarily fall right under my jurisdiction, but we filter some calls, noise complaints, high traffic, neighborhood disputes, dogs, people shooting guns off in marijuana grows, people using tannerite, if you know what that is, and blowing that up, and so it's just generally some of it is criminal, some of it is just bad neighbors, just being bad neighbors, not considerate, but you name it, we get it across the board. It's hard to pinpoint what is the number one complaint. For us, probably the biggest thing is the crime associated with it at this point, because it's such a
crime associated.
Just because it's a resource, it takes resources to deal with it, and it takes time for our patrol officers. Alarm calls, per OLCC, the regulations, you have to have an alarm and you have to have cameras up at your grow sites, and so frequently we'll have to respond to alarms that are false alarms. Because of the regulations for land use, which is EFU, in the county, they're not just generally close by. So we'll spend an hour driving to an alarm to find out that it was an accidental, thing. So it just consumes resources differently than was in the past, and so we're more busy. And when you add that on top of the other issues, so it's become taxing. So we applied for a grant a couple years ago. And it sounds like a long time, but as time goes by really fast. To get two positions through it's a COPS grant to the Department of Justice, U.S. Department of Justice, and those two guys are working now in the marijuana.
So they're here already.
They're here. Yeah, we hired and we had to train, and then we would move more seasoned deputies into those positions. But they're focusing on these issues of livability. So, when we get complaints of grows that are illegal, they go out. Inspect, or they'll go out, look around, check on licensing, coordinate with our partners, and then they're out there to deal with livability issues. You have neighbors not getting along, but the grow's legal. So then it's like, how do we get them to, live in harmony, so to speak, or at least get along to where they're not generate calls for service for law enforcement, and that they can, be neighborly. So they're working on those aspects, and that program started in July.
Okay.
So we've been able to deal with a few issues thus far, so it's been pretty successful. And then we're really hoping to fire up a task force through this grant that we applied for, and we'll find out in a couple of weeks what allocation of the grant money we do
good.
get.
I'm glad to hear that. What you go to, Joe? You go to those meetings. Is what the sheriff's saying? Is that what they want?
It's a myriad of complaints that come from the neighbors, and even as you mentioned, if people are trying to do it right, but the lights and the things like that that impact. And there's also just some things of people that are uncomfortable having their grandkids next to these girls. These people they've never known in their county neighborhoods, they've never been around, and there's all kinds of traffic that never existed before. So it creates, and I think it's great to have a committee formed, because listen to the list of issues that we have identified, and somebody's got to be a clearinghouse, come together where you can start to work on solutions.
And remember, the value of rural properties has fallen in the last year. I mean, the total number of rural properties has dropped. The value has not kept up with everything, with other valuations. So it is having an effect on real estate, and it's all really by the marijuana world, it seems to be. Now, does that make sense
actually,
to you?
Actually, one of the cool things that come out of the committee and is we'll come up with something that needs to be done, and we'll find out that he's already been kind of working on that thing for a little while. So he's really been ahead of it, and a few things that we've identified, we've looked, and it's like, man, he's already in the middle of taking care of it. So maybe it won't have to work that hard.
Do other counties, other places across the country come here and talk to you about this and look at what you're doing here? Or what's happening that way around?
Are you referring to other states that might be considering legalizing? We haven't been contacted. I think we have a unique issue in Southern Oregon, obviously, with the area is known as the Emerald Triangle or whatnot, and so. Us in Josephine County hold like 60% of the licensed grows or something like that. So we are, I guess, we are in the prime location. So we have the most unique situation, because we have lower populations compared to the metro areas, but we have this really dense growing population. Right. And so the way when Measure 91 was set up and passed by legislation of the voters, they didn't set up. It wasn't set up really to favor the areas that were going to be impacted the most. It was more set up based on sales, and whatnot. So that's taken a while for even us to get any revenue from the state. We are starting to get it now. Yeah. And
they're recognizing it. It sounds like. And
there's
at least you're there doing it. We got a break coming up here, so hold on to those thoughts there. We already talked about how you with financing some of this stuff, and we can even do that with Guy. So there's just lots of talking about. We're with Sheriff Nate Sickler, Guy Giles here on the Real Estate Show. Pete and Joe, we're coming right back here to KCMX right after this. And welcome back to the Real Estate Show here on KCMX News Media 880. Pete and Joe, the Real Estate Guys, with you. Next week, got a show coming up on the rental market here in Jackson County, and we'll update you on what's going on there. Of course, you can check out any of our shows at realestateshowOregon.com, too. Nate Sickler, the Jackson County Sheriff, is here, along with Guy Giles from Bank 34 Mortgage. We're really talking about all sorts of things the sheriff's involved with, which is talking about marijuana, those types of issues. First of all, let me turn to Guy for a second, Joe, because we talk about these properties, how many were sold, the prices that went out, all the green rush of this whole thing. And today, what's that like in your world, the loan world regarding marijuana and these issues?
That piece of it's actually calmed down for us quite a bit. I did get a call over the weekend about wanting to buy a marijuana property. A while back, everybody wanted to buy one. Everybody wanted something, and I've always steered clear of that, mainly because I don't want to put somebody in a bad position. I mean, it is still federally illegal, and the money that we lend is federal money. So, I would hate to have this problem with trafficking. You call it what, drug dealing. Yeah. But when it goes over the state lines, they have a more fun word for it. But it really is illegal, and if the feds end up jumping in on this thing, who knows? So if we can't keep our own house clean, they might come in, and then all of a sudden they're foreclosing on your house because you're doing an illegal weed grow. So it's something that I've never dove into at all.
You can't finance them. I've even heard stories of where people who want to sell properties that have been grown, they have to remove everything from the site that it would even be associated with the grow site in order to even to get it financed to put it on the market. So that's what's happening then.
Yeah, and usually from the appraisal, I'm not getting a whole bunch of pictures of what's going on out in the fields and things like that, and they must just be cleaned up pretty well. But it hasn't been something that's been hitting us on that end at all.
I've seen some grow sites on the MLS come up in the $1 million ranges with all these pictures of all these grow sites. And I'm going, oh my goodness, you got to have cash. I mean, it's just all it is to it. You have to have cash, or you cannot.
And those people,
nobody's going to buy it.
Greatly overpaid in anticipation of making a fortune off of it, and so they're being caught in the market dynamics right now. And who would have thought that Williams in Josephine County, this is the area that was the champion of medical marijuana, where really the roots, no pun intended, of the medical industry. They're the ones that really stood up first and said, the livability of our area has been greatly diminished since it became legal, and the rush came on. Up until that point, there was a pretty good balance. So it's about being neighborly. I think that comes up at every one of the land use planning or commissioners meetings. It's about being good neighbors to one another, and that's where the problems start if you can't, if you impose on your neighbors.
And then there have been a few changes, and I don't know all the specifics. There are terms for things that I'm just kind of getting my head wrapped around, but in the old days, you could just kind of apply and then take forever and really not get your compliance piece done and just kind of grow and then be that bad neighbor. But there are some things that are accelerating. You might remember the word for that, but I don't. But anyway, it's one of those things where people they'd apply and then they wouldn't do anything else compliance-wise, and nobody could touch them at all. And now they're giving them some certain times where they have to get something done. They're also able to place liens on properties.
Really?
And that's actually, that would maybe wake up a landowner that is letting somebody use their property for that.
Well, I blame the OLCC for this whole mess personally, because they didn't know what they were doing when they started. They just started issuing, everybody could apply for these permits. And right now, I took a class, a few months ago, and it was like there were 18, I wrote down these notes, 1,821 licenses had been granted, recreational marijuana licenses has been granted in the state, of which 2/3 of those were growers, of which 2/3 of those were in Jackson and Josephine counties. Yeah. And they still had another 1,570 applications that they were going to process, of which 2/3 were growers, and 2/3 of those growers were in Jackson and Josephine counties. No wonder they got such oversupply, and nobody voted for 55-acre marijuana plots in this county. The OLCC, to me, is the one who screwed this whole thing up. They're moving to they're bringing in more people now. They're putting a new office in next to John L. Scott. Down there. That's how they're going to do it.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody anticipated what happened, or else
how could they not anticipate this? You tell me. We all did.
I think law enforcement. I don't know how much law enforcement had a place at the table. That was before I was a sheriff.
Yeah, good point.
And I don't know that, so I don't want to comment on that and say something that's out of turn. I do know the local OLCC. The director and the folks that work here, they're good people too, and they're trying to do their job, and they're overwhelmed just like everybody else.
By it.
Well, they can't even address a fraction of the complaints.
One of the problems that they have is if they go in and they go to check out a place and it's completely illegal, they have no jurisdiction. They cannot do anything but turn around and leave. So I mean, we're thinking that they might be able to do something, but finding somebody that's able to have some teeth to be able to get something done. I mean, these guys are literally turned around at the gate on an illegal grow, and there's nothing
about it.
Yeah, so they can't hardly help.
They're not an enforcement aspect. So what if somebody is found to have not complied with, say, land use rules within the county, or not following the county directives as to how the grow should be, they can revoke their permit, or they can not issue the permit depending on what stage they're at in this. And at that point, their involvement with that individual and that grow becomes the jurisdiction of the law enforcement agency. So it was, like I said, there's a lot of things that need to be tweaked, and this is kind of what this marijuana advisory committee is for, is to
address some of these,
find these gaps, maybe propose some information to our commissioners so that they can put some pressure on the state.
Legislators still be too mad at the OLCC.
Why?
Look at the Oregon health care plan. Come on. And we have leadership issues that are just failing us. But this is just one of the long list of things we're not doing and managing well as a state.
No.
Yeah,
Your
and,
vote
and, well,
counts.
see,
Politically, leaning aside, just my own state, my own assessment.
All right.
yeah, and, you know, and I don't. Like I said,
You're
the
clear of that.
state. I'll say the state in general because you know woefully unprepared for this.
Woefully,
Yes.
okay, that's fair.
The
Okay.
voters, I think, at least in this area, were duped by
I believe
you know
so.
Measure
I think so.
91.
Yep.
I think if they could go back and do it again in this area, we may not have the same results. I don't know, but based on the amount of complaints
That's
and the
the
things that have
experiences.
Or a
changed,
different way of handling it or doing
yeah,
that kind of
or
thing.
just
I don't
you know there may have been a
something
lot
along
more
that.
If they
regulations
knew
written
this
into
is what
the.
they were voting for, it would have changed a
This is
lot.
the way it was going to come up.
I think so.
Okay.
I mean, I hear that from time to time. So you know, maybe getting things changed a bit through the legislation, at least limiting the amount of grows. You know, the permits.
Yeah.
at a
That's
time.
what-
I mean,
that's what I
that's a
think.
big thing. And
Yeah.
of course, then funding the people that are charged with
With
regulating it.
unfortunate,
Yes.
yes.
Yeah, you know, I think they've tracked, and I don't know if this is, I can't remember the number. I thought they tracked marijuana to 37 different states out of
That's-
Oregon.
that's what I
You
remember.
remember that
Yeah,
too?
yeah, I wouldn't
so
doubt
don't,
that.
so don't hold me to that, but
Yeah.
somewhere like that, and so we have a significant. The state will call it diversion. I just call it dealing drugs. You know, is what it is.
Yeah,
They're not
it
supposed to do
is,
it, but so we have a significant issue leaving, and so this year, you know, we have finally gotten some resources. The state police has assigned detectives down here, and they have a marijuana unit now. So
Excellent.
they have
Okay,
detectives
all right.
assigned to dealing with this. So that's been hugely helpful. And then of course we have our two deputies. They're not involved in necessarily all of the criminal aspects, although they're involved with that. It's just not their primary function. And you know, people don't understand. You know, when you're talking about this many grows, so pretty much everywhere you grow. If you've flown into Medford during the daytime and you
sure
look out
see
your
'em.
window,
Yeah,
you see
do.
it. You
Yeah,
see everything.
Absolutely, sure.
If you fly around in a helicopter, I mean, you just look
Our
around.
county administrator did a flyover. I've
Yeah.
seen the video.
Yeah, you just-
very
Yeah.
just
Yeah, I mean that's
touching the edges of the county outside the city limits, and it's everywhere.
yeah. So
Okay, yeah.
And
no,
so-
I,
We flew the plane,
yeah,
by the
I
way.
believe it. Okay.
when you know, and people expect, you know, because the system isn't well understood, when a deputy pulls up on a domestic, you know, violence call or a theft call or burglary call, that they're going to just automatically investigate the legalities of the grow, which
Right.
just isn't the case. It's complicated. There's a lot of nuances to it. There's a lot of different avenues to confirm information, and then there's a lot of work that goes into removing the grow if it is illegal. So this isn't a job like your patrol deputy or your patrol officer for a city can just go and deal with in a matter of minutes, right? This is a big deal, and you know, it takes a lot of resources to go up and deal with these things.
Look at how sheriffing has changed.
Yeah.
Look what you're dealing with
Yeah.
today
Yeah.
versus 10 years ago, 20 years
Yeah.
ago. I mean, I can't even how much what you do. And
Yeah,
your line
it
of
changes.
work has
It changes.
changed.
The
Wow.
last 10 years, it's been
Yeah.
it's changed so much.
Yeah.
There's so many different things you have to kind of keep
Yeah.
keep aware of.
And there's not enough people who need or use marijuana in the state of Oregon that could smoke everything that's produced
Well-
just in Jackson and Josephine County. So obviously, that just abundance of the oversurplus is going to go straight into the black market. That's
Well, if it was the people
Really
who
what we're
wrote
trying to
the
avoid,
people who
yeah.
wrote the rules, as usual, the voters say this, and the people who write the rules, I just couldn't believe that they didn't put it. They're saying that there's oversupply. It's all these
Oh,
problems. That we're still going to give these. We're still going to issue more licenses
No.
because the state didn't give them
Right.
a set number.
Right.
So that's
Yeah.
just dumb. I mean, I just
Yeah.
don't get some of those kinds of
Or
things.
start
that,
slowly and grow
these are
into
supposed to be
it, so
smart people
speak.
that do this anyway. So we want to change the subject for a second. There's so many other things to talk about.
I know it could consume a lot. We talk about it for
Oh.
an
It
hour
just-
and a half
it
every
just
other
go- it
Monday,
just
and
goes on.
we just it goes and goes.
Yeah.
Wow.
What other real estate related kinds of issues do you see out there that you have to deal with that people need to know about that come up?
Oh, for us getting into real estate, we're probably where those intersect is going to be in our civil division. When there's foreclosures.
Foreclosures.
Yeah. And
Okay.
it seemed like we've had quite a few of those we've had to do, or eviction orders as of late.
Okay.
Where our deputies have to go out and serve a court-ordered eviction.
Okay.
That seems to have been on an uptick. Talking to my civil guys, I don't have any numbers for you, but anecdotally they say, yeah, we've been doing a lot of these evictions.
A lot,
Rentals?
I think it's-
that's from rentals or from
and I don't have that information, so maybe I can follow up with you. But
That's interesting. Okay.
I'm sure it's a combination of both. But
Probably.
the housing market. So when the housing market becomes thin, or when there's not very much surplus, and then of course there's a few rentals and
Yeah.
prices are driving up,
Go
and
up.
that probably impacts some of those things, I would imagine.
Yeah. What are
You guys are the experts in that stuff.
Sheriff Sickler is married to a pretty good real estate agent.
Yeah,
so he's got some inside.
Throw that
scoop
card.
on it.
Yeah, throw that card later.
You know
Yeah,
the vernacular pretty well.
Well, we have to give full disclosure, okay?
Yeah.
The sheriff is married to Deanna Sickler, who was an agent at John L. Scott. She's one of the best agents around, and so I'm sure the two of you have had some. You probably know more about real estate than any other sheriff in the country.
Probably talk a little business at home.
Yeah, I have a good teacher.
I bet you do. So, what other things that are out there that sheriff auctions? You still do those kinds of things?
Yeah, we still do house sales.
We're still seeing
property sales, different things.
Seeing those kinds of things come on.
Yeah, I don't think we're near what we were. We still do them, but it's not as regular. It seems like that has slowed down a bit.
Well, that's a good sign. I think that's a good thing.
It's great. Foreclosures aren't good. The economy's, that's a sign of the the economy slipping into 08 and 09 when the market kind of crashed, and then that took several years for us to catch up for that workload. Of course, all the banks and everybody else. I mean, just all the stuff that it takes a long time to kind of get over that.
We still haven't cleared all that inventory.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, we have a break coming up. We got one more segment to go, and I do want to ask the sheriff about the effect of real estate with so many people moving in, so many homes being built. It has to have an effect on what you do in terms of jail and all those kinds of things you're talking about. Because again, this place is growing. It's not gonna slow down, I don't think, and so it puts pressure on infrastructure, which people have to watch that. So you're having to do that. Anyway, we got a break coming up. We're with Guy Giles and Sheriff Nate Sickler today on the Real Estate Show. We are coming right back with the final segment right after this. And welcome back to the Real Estate Show here on KCMX News Media 880. Pete and Joe, the Real Estate Guys, with you. Don't forget, you can check out any of our past shows at realestateshoworegon.com. And we've had some terrific shows in the last few weeks, it seems like, from estate planning on down, and lots of good information like we've had today with the sheriff and Guy Giles. Before we go too far, Guy, just give us an update on kind of mortgage interest rates here at the end of August, school starting. Generally, the market kind of starts to slow its fall colors a little bit. Tell me what you've been doing and what you're seeing.
Well, I'm still busier than heck. Praise
That's
God
good
for
to
that.
hear. I like that. Okay.
They're probably 3/4 of a point higher than they were a year ago. Overall, they're actually staying. They're staying pretty mellow. Everybody's.
What's the range?
Well, if you have good credit and you're paying, a little bit in points, maybe 4.625 at my bank right now.
That's still below 5%. That's pretty good.
If your credit's lame, then you could be a little bit over 5, just kind of depending. I have a lady that I quoted at on a condo that was a little bit higher than that today. So there are factors that go in about 26 things in quoting inaccurate rates. That's why I always fight about trying to get one out of me.
And we always ask you where your clients, where they're coming from, what they're doing, what are they buying right now? What's the kind of the theme this week here?
I have still got people moving from out of town.
Still at,
but it's one of those things where I'm also seeing some local kids. One little girl that I had this morning in from the state. She got a little $20,000 raise in the last year and a half since she was talking about it last time, and a little bug that rates are up some, but for the most part, she's in a great position to buy. She's saved 5% down, and 20% is ideal, but if you have at least 5%, you can do conventional.
A little $20,000 raise, that's pretty doing well.
She was stoked about it. No, they're actually staying all right. Going into the election, markets like gridlock, so if Anyway, I could go deep into that, but I honestly think that the rates should be pretty good. I don't think they're going to move up like they were.
Did you see where Jackson County, the latest population statistics of Jackson County? Very interesting. Little over 1 out of 5 people are 65 and older in this county. That has jumped 5% in just a few years.
Wow!
Do you know what's crazy?
So what we're seeing is that retirees coming up here. Obviously, it's not coming to the natural population. So, but 1 out of 5. 1 out of 5.
I wrote something down.
What are we going to do with them? Where are they going to go? Where are they going to go live after a while? Oh my goodness. Okay.
I actually wrote something down since you love all these statistics. The average person that is turning old enough to retire right now. I'm diving into some reverse mortgages and that sort of thing. So that was kind of on my mind. It took 2 times their annual income. Their annual income back then was about $5,800 per year, and the average house was $12,600. Right now, the average income, and this is for the United States, is $51,000, and the average house is $279. Now takes 5 years of your full, if you weren't taxed on it at all, to buy a house, and it was only 2. back then when those guys were born.
That's a good stat.
And still, the statistics still show that Americans still the best place to invest your money. What's number one?
Your home.
It's in real estate.
Yep.
Still, it's not stocks. It's not other thing, gold or bitcoins or whatever else you want to do. It still remains real estate is still the most solid investment for you. So that backs that up and proves that. Well, anyway, we're almost out of time. I want to get back here. The sheriff here again, with Nate Sickler again. We appreciate you coming down and spending some time with us. And I'm just so curious as to what other things that out there that you want to talk to people about here today. We got you here that concern you, that you think you're doing. I know that real estate, as we say, more people are moving here. We're older. We're this. More pressure on really you.
Yeah, I mean, law enforcement for us, we've become incredibly more busy over the last few years. Our calls for service were up from in 2017. I think we were up like over 40% from 2016 even. So the whole landscape has changed in Jackson County. I think everyone takes note of the homelessness issue we have here. We got opioids has
the
plagued
opioid epidemic.
our valley.
Yeah.
Our lack of jails. Our lack of jail space has.
You just take people in. I remember when I've been in the news business. This was years ago. Even this hasn't changed.
Yeah.
The people who were the jail guys, the people who were at the jail, say it's the same people all the time. We let them go. They come back. They commit all the crime, and we just take them right back in and let them go.
They wreak havoc on people who are not used to being violated and stolen from, and they just go back and do it again and again, and it diminishes the quality of life for our neighborhoods, and it's everywhere. No one's safe.
Yeah, it's true. It really is an issue. The good news is we're still working on plans for a new jail.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
That's moving forward and in a very positive direction. And then we're doing a lot of things within our jail too that we haven't done before. We've started that failed to appear initiative, so we're cracking down on folks who are not appearing in court. Well, and with the limited bed space that we do have, I just started off and said, we can just take a little bit at a time. So we have 10 beds allocated to that, which means that the 10 people come in and then they don't get out until they deal with their cases, and they're being held for a couple weeks, 3 weeks, or until they go to prison, or until they get their cases at trial, or whatever the case is. Well, this is a system-wide approach. This was a collaborative effort between all of our partners in the criminal justice system. And we're starting. We've changed the configuration of our jail slightly so we can house more female offenders.
Because we're seeing an increase. We
are, and they're one of our worst failed to appear offenders.
Are women? Okay.
Yeah, for the percentage, right?
Sure.
So we've rearranged the jail. We've added a few bunks, so we're going to increase our capacity next week by 8 beds overall. Which I know it sounds like it's minimal, but every bed helps at this time. Every bed helps. And then we're also we're not going to be releasing inmates at night anymore either, unless we're in really bad shape. So we're going to up our nighttime capacity, because the way the jail's designed, it's very staff intensive. It takes a lot of staff to watch inmates as they move around, and it's very busy and it's linear, so it's just not a good design. But at night, everyone's supposed to be asleep. So when somebody's doing something that's out of the norm, which is out of their bunk, it's real easy to spot. You know what I mean? So we can take a few more inmates at night based on some of these reconfigurations and stuff that we're doing. So we're going to try to not release inmates at night, and that will hopefully prevent some of the
reoccurring.
Inmate gets up in the middle of the night, where are they going to go? Back to a drug house or go steal stuff or the prime area when there's no one else up. So then we're going to be able to link them more effectively with services too.
That's
drug and alcohol, mental health services. Because if we're taking them all out at 7 in the morning, 8 in the morning, those services are open and they'll have better opportunities. So we're hoping doing all those things in conjunction with adding some space and a couple programs. Working with community justice to do some cool projects. Those are in the works, but that's going to come out. And so I think we're going to have at least a stopgap, or at least some improvements until we can put something about a new jail forward to the voters.
And are y'all working together okay? Because I know over the years, different departments fight and didn't do this.
I tell you,
because you can't do it alone.
And this is one thing that's we can say, and we've had police chiefs from other areas who've moved into our area. Our former jail commander who retired, Dan Penland, he used to work in different areas of the state as a jail inspector, and the relationships in Jackson County right now between all of the municipalities, the DA's office, the community justice, you name it within criminal justice system.
Okay.
The relationships are better than they've ever been.
Good.
Everybody's working. Everyone knows what the issues are. Everyone's trying to collaborate to work on them. So it's the best it's been since I've been working in Jackson County.
And you've been around. You've been around a while doing this.
I mean, it's really effective. I mean, we help each other out. We talk about issues. We find collaborative ways to deal with them, and it's been really helpful. And I think we're on a good direction.
Hey, you guys,
it has to be a collaborative effort.
Oh yeah,
to make the new
I got to
jail
say
go.
something really quick.
You gotta hurry. Yeah.
He's a good guy, and he won't say it because he's just busy getting the job done. But there is an election coming up, so keep him in mind when this happens. And I tell you, I don't just have everybody on the radio that I talk to. I was super happy to get him on here, and he's in the middle of some things that we'd really like to see him continue.
Well, it's a tough position, and it takes lots of cooperation, lots of effort on your part to do it. So really, we wish you well. And
It sounds like good progress is being made.
We're excited, and our jail folks are excited, and we got a bunch of things coming. So maybe in a couple months we'll have an update of even more. But I think
his wife does write really good contracts. I've done a couple of them with her before. So
she's
give her a call.
Nate, we wish you well. Thank you for coming, Guy. Nice to see you as well. So a lot of work. God, we would have learned again today here on the Real Estate Show. That'll do it for the Real Estate Show here today. Thanks for joining us. For Pete and Joe, have a great week, everybody. God bless you all. We'll see you next week right back here in KCMX.